Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ripple Movement's Hangout session, which we call the Ripple Hangout. This is our second episode ever. Those of you who've actually managed to tune into yesterday's episode or replayed it afterwards, thank you so much for tuning in. And do bear with us once again, because this is kind of a completely new incentive for us, and we're still sort of fine-tuning a lot of things at the moment, so it's getting there. It's really getting there, and we actually learned from a lot of the mistakes and some of the bandwidth problems as well from yesterday. And with our two episodes airing today, right now, and in about 5 hours' time, we should be able to deliver something quite nice for you guys. And so I'm going to go straight to the first ever customary bit of the Ripple Hangout itself, for me to tell you a little bit about what's going on and what we do. So, hello everybody, my name is Dylan Lowe, and I am the founder and project leader of the Ripple Movement itself. And so what we are, basically, we are a travel media collaborative that's aiming to use travel blogging as a way of raising awareness about various social issues around the world. So we're going to have about 14 independent projects going out there in the summer between July and November, investigating a variety of topics. So we're going to have things like sign language, architecture, we're going to have impact consumerism, we're going to have nomadic communities, we're going to have food anthropology. But today specifically, we're going to be speaking to two of our projecteers who are actually going to be doing something about responsibilities, the responsibilities of tourism, of travel, of how people should behave, how people should be leaving a positive impact wherever they go around the world. So on top of that, though, what we also do kind of have today is the equivalent of the Bollywood of travel blogging itself, because we've got two relatively well-known travel bloggers who either is from India or specifically talk about India itself. So we actually have Mariellen over here from Brief and Go. Say hello to everybody.
Hello. But I'm not in India. I'm in Toronto at the moment.
You've got a little piece of India with you at the moment, with the portraits behind you as well, which is kind of a nice sort of fitting look, actually. Thank you for setting the ambience for all of us today. And then we also have Shivya, which I'm pointing towards now. Say hi to everyone, Shivya. Shivya is currently in India at the moment, isn't she?
I am. I'm in the state of Goa. It's just the rains have just started and everything is really lush and beautiful. So
I can see that there's a bit of a breeze going on as well in the background. It's kind of nice, actually. It's got that sort of nice hum in the background with the raindrops and everything. It's kind of nice, actually. It's always good to see our projecteers out there actively doing things, actively on their travels, doing some documentation of basically the subjects they're really passionate about already, even before the Ripple Movement starts in mid-July at the moment. So I'm going to go straight into the next customary bit, as we decided to set up the other day when we did our first session. So before we go into talk a little bit more about each of the projecteers, what they do, what they are, and what they're hoping to achieve for the Ripple Movement this summer, I just want to ask you guys what you had for breakfast this morning. Mariellen, let's start with you.
What did I have for breakfast? I've been avoiding putting that on social media for about 10 years, and now you've put me on the spot. I had gluten-free cereal with almond milk, and I had ginger tea with lemon and honey, and I have that every day.
You have that virtually every day.
When I'm here in Toronto, yeah. When I'm in India, it's all over the map. It just depends on what I can get.
And yeah, I was actually going to say that might be a bit difficult to source sometimes in India, isn't it?
Oh yeah, no, I don't eat. I eat completely different in India, obviously. Usually I have like sabzi masala omelette or something.
Well, that's always nice too. What about you, Shivya?
So I'm in Goa right now, and every morning there's a bread man who delivers freshly baked bread. So the Goan bread is called poi, and that's what I had this morning with some homemade mango jam and some puffs from the bakery. So yeah, quite a delightful breakfast.
I always decided to ask this question with these hangouts because well, for one, that makes me incredibly jealous of you guys for all the deliciousness and everything, even though I'm not really a breakfast person. But the second reason why I would want to ask that question is because breakfast is always a good place to start with trying to establish a sense of place with where these people are at the moment. So with you, Mariellen, so basically now you're back to now you're back in gluten-free land, which is the great
That's right.
in Canada. How long have you been back for? I mean, one of the last times I checked in, you were still in India, and you've actually been back in Canada for a little while now. So what's been happening with you?
Well, I have kind of a dual identity. I have a dual. I almost feel like I have dual citizenship. Not technically, but you know, I live in basically now. I live in India half the year. When it gets cold here, I go to India, and when it gets hot there, I come back here. So I love both. People ask me, and I'm the grass is greener where I am. So I'm very happy to be in Canada in the summer. Canada in the summer is paradise. I mean, it's paradise. I can't think of anywhere where else I'd rather be, which is the reason I chose to do my project here in Canada in the summer. I mean, this is it. But unfortunately, I'm not a winter person. I don't like the cold. And also, as beautiful as Canada is, you know, I love the color and the excitement and the culture and the heat and the food and the spiciness and everything else about India. So I'm setting myself up to live there half the year and live here half the year, and that will be my perfect life. That's my ideal life.
And it's a dual life that you haven't always had, I guess. I mean, I think with you, and you know, from what I know about you, is that somewhere along the lines, somewhere along the line of your life, you became so in sync, so synchronized with India that you actually claim that India is your spiritual home, and then that was one of the reasons why Breathe Dream Go existed in the first place, because of your connection with the place, and you want to document your time in India. I mean, tell us a little bit about how your blog came about, and you know, why you decided to write what you write and document what you document.
Well, when you say India was one of the reasons, no, India was the reason. It was the one and only reason. I'm very straightforward about the fact that I went to India under difficult circumstances in my own life, where I was actually recovering from depression, the loss of both my parents, a few other losses. They all piled up, and I was in a pretty bad place. And I really needed to do something really big to shake up my life. I needed to restart my life. I was in a bad place. I was in a very deep depression. And it's a kind of a long story, but I decided that I needed to start manifesting my dreams. And my first dream was actually to become a yoga teacher. I'd wanted to do yoga teacher training for years. And finally, I just decided I'm going to do it. I'm not ready, but I did it anyway. And it was during yoga teacher training when I got this just an overwhelming compulsion to go to India, and then I started planning and saving. It took me about a year, and then in December of 2005 I went to India for the first time, and it was almost immediate. I think my first day in Delhi, I just went, this is it. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt at home, and it was instant, and it was overwhelming, and it was uncanny. And I've heard other people say that they've gone to a different culture other than their own and felt this kind of incredibly strong affinity. So I came up with this term called soul culture. I don't know, other people might use it too, but as far as I know, I coined it. And so that's how the term I used to explain how I just had this uncanny and instant affinity with the culture of India. And I call it my soul culture, even though my ancestry is obviously not Indian at all. I mean, it's Irish mostly. But there you go. And I didn't expect it. It just happened. I've been to lots of places. I've lived in Japan. I've traveled a lot. But I didn't feel this anywhere, and I have never felt it anywhere else except India. And it's never abated. It's going to be 10 years this year that I started traveling there, and I feel the same way. I mean, even more so, than I ever have, I would say. So it's not something that, it wasn't like you know, an obsession that just sort of came and went, as they sometimes do. It's just definitely something, there's something deeper there for me, which I don't fully understand. It's a mystery, but, you know, I accept it. It's great. Life is mystery.
Yeah. And also, those of you who are actually watching right now, I'm actually taking notes along the side. So I've put a little side note that basically reminds me to go and trademark soul culture later. Or at least check if there's actually a trademark already existing. So for whoever reason there's actually a person who's trademarked soul culture out there.
Maybe I'll just call my lawyer right now.
Well, this is all for a good cause, soul culture and all that. But you actually bang on the head with that one, actually, because, you know, one of the things that's really underappreciated in travel blogging in particular, or, you know, even blogging in particular, is that everybody started off on a personal journey. And that travel blogging really is a vessel, it's a canvas to express that. And, you know, the fact that there's actually not that many blogs who actually would present themselves with a personal voice without the origin story and things like that, it really is a shame. And, you know, it's something that you, Shivya, have actually, you know, really spoke about very recently as well, because one of your most well-received pieces recently is when you wrote a piece on BBC Travel about how you quit your job and went traveling.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's probably not even flattery. Anyways, it's just an honest observation that you are probably by far one of the biggest travel bloggers in India, who's also a homegrown Indian travel blogger as well. Yeah, I mean, your journeys take you around the world. I mean, how do the two interact? Your own personal journey and your blog, The Shooting Star. I mean, how do they collide, and how do they come into existence in the first place?
Right. So I don't have you know, a story as dramatic as Mariellen's, where, you know, I was traveling out of my own country to, you know, find answers for myself, and hence the journey started. But I think it was just the fact that I used to you know, work in a cubicle job like many of my readers, and I used to follow a lot of international bloggers and their journeys across the world, and wonder, why can't I do it? Like, why do I have to sit behind a desk and away my hours and take permission before I get leave and so forth? And I think that's what, and at the time I was working at the Singapore Tourism Board, and I was really, I mean, I was part of the social media team, so I was on the other side of things, building relationships with bloggers and handling social media and so forth. And at some point of time, I decided that, you know, if I was going to take a leap of faith, it had to be now, and really put everything to the test. So I took a 2-month sabbatical from work, and I spent the first month traveling across Europe, which was my first Europe trip, and it sort of really opened me up to the world, because until then I had only seen Asia. And the second month of that I spent back in India. I went to the Himalayas, and I volunteered with a responsible travel organization there. And I realized that there's so much more to the world than, you know, than to be sitting behind a cubicle and working. And when I got back to my work, you know, within the first week, I decided to quit. And I never really thought I could, you know, I could make a living as a travel blogger. But I wanted to keep blogging just because I loved writing, and I wanted to share these stories I found on my travels, the people I met, and you know, the things that surprised me. And I think that's what it is today as well. It's still a journey, you know, for me, and my blog is still a platform for me to document those journeys. But I think I've also tried to integrate the practical aspects of travel, so that if someone wants to replicate my journey, or you know, even replicate the places that I go to, they have practical information to do that. So I think it's really about striking the balance between your voice and who you are, but also empowering people with the kind of information they need to make, you know, make better choices when they travel. And that kind of relates back to my my topic with the Ripple movement as well, which is responsible travel. And I think the more I travel, the more I realize how much our choices impact, you know, the places that we go to, the people who live in those places, and how we can really make a difference while also having a better time. So that's really the idea of my blog and my project with the Ripple movement.
Yep. So as a zealous reader of your blog, well, hear me out and help me out with this one as well. So as a reader, and you talked about how you want to help your readers replicate your journey and, you know, have all the encounters in all the places that you've been to. So if I am to ask you, how do I get to have that awesome breakfast of yours right now, and where to find it, which really is a question of saying, you know, where are you right now? And I can see that there are a couple of people milling around outside as well, tending to the garden. Tell us more about the place you're at, and you know, you also talked a little bit about your project as well, which is all about responsible travel itself. How does that incorporate into the places that you choose as you go along? So basically, the two questions here is the two questions are: where are you now, and how do you choose the places you go to?
Right. So the first, I think your first question was, how can you have that awesome breakfast?
Yep.
And my answer is, go read my blog. But so right now I'm at so when most people think of Goa, you know, travelers to India, they think of the beaches, which is what Goa is most popular for. But 2 years ago, I decided to spend a month in Goa, and I wanted to do something different. I wanted to meet the locals, and I wanted to see, you know, the way they live. And Goa has a Portuguese heritage as compared to the rest of India, which has a British heritage. So I came across, you know, a couple who are descendants of a Portuguese Russian family and have been living in Goa for 3 generations. In fact, right now in this house, there are 3 generations of Goan Portuguese, you know, people who live here. And when I read about their place, so it's basically this house dates back about 500 years, and they're doing everything they can in their capacity to keep this house as it is, to restore the heritage of the house. It's surrounded by fruit orchards, and they grow their own vegetables. You know, they do a bit of organic farming and so forth. And you know, they still have their own well from 500 years ago that they use for water, and it has better water than most cities in India. And you know, you can actually, when you step out in the neighborhood, you can actually meet people and talk to them, and you know, these are people who've lived here for generations. So really understand, you know, what is sort of like the soul of Goa, you know, how the people still live here. Whereas you know, you can go to the beaches and you can stay on a beach shack and enjoy the water, which is fine. But it's only when you come into the interiors of Goa that you realize that, you know, this is a completely different life, and there are people here who are trying to preserve their heritage and their culture. And I think that's what responsible travel is about. It's not just about you know, it's not about making sacrifices to save the environment or, you know, help a local community, but it's really about deepening your experience of a place. Right? It's about your interactions with the local people, the local food, the local community, their culture, and so forth. And yeah, that's exactly what I try to do on my blog, and that's what I want to research deeper in. And how I find these, yeah.
Sorry,
no, sorry, go ahead.
and what you actually did say is like the whole idea of the heritage is a sense of family as well, right? You're talking about like generation passed down from generation, and I guess this is kind of what I've got stuck in my head a little bit as well. I just want to throw that little trivia out because this is kind of where there are bits and bobs of crossovers going on between the different projects as well, because we're all talking about travel, but you know, they're all just fun facts in travel. And correct me, am I wrong, but one of the Indian dishes, the vindaloo, actually has a Portuguese root rather than, you know, what people consider as like an Indian dish. So I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. So I just find that little things like that really cool as well.
Yeah.
Especially the idea that, you know, the Portuguese trader would have come in and it would have invented something whilst it being forced to source from local ingredients and things like that. The same way that in Pondicherry there are a lot of French-inspired dishes that use a lot of herbs, so very Provençal sort of things. And yeah, once again, it's sort of, you know, family recipes being passed down like generation from generation to generation. And yeah, it's fantastic. And you know, on the subject of family itself, and I'm going to toss this ball back to you, Mariellen. With your particular independent project, it's very much about family and your own childhood sort of cross-section of it as well, because the journey you want to undertake, which is around the Canadian, the Maritimes of it, the Atlantic Maritimes, and you're not necessarily approaching it from the perspective of just about the subject itself, but it is personal to you. You are retracing a childhood memory. You are retracing a childhood journey. How was that journey, and what actually spurred you to want to retrace it in the first place?
Well, we were talking earlier about my blog and the sort of genesis of my blog, Breathe, Dream, Go, and how it started because of, a very profound, life-changing journey I took to India for 6 months in 2005, 2006. But my blog, myself, my blog, my work has evolved, as we all do. And I started to see my blog more as still about India, but as it evolved, it also, I realized the sub-theme of my blog is what I call meaningful adventure travel. And don't trademark that one either. Um, uh, so I came up with this term, meaningful adventure travel. And I realized, yeah, so the way I approach travel is it has to have a deeper meaning, more meaningful connection for me, where it's a little bit like what Shivya was talking about just having a deeper connection to the places I travel. I like to travel very slowly. I like to stay places. Like there's an ashram I go to in India, and I like to stay for a month and write, stories about, the conscious. I wrote a story called conscious eating at an ashram in India. So I like to kind of dig a little deeper and find those connections. And quite often for me, yeah, the personal connection to a place is really important to me. And I'm an imaginative person. I'm a creative person. Always have been, always a big reader. And so I often find myself really inspired to travel, to go somewhere through my imagination. It's a little hard to explain, but it's kind of like my imagination gets triggered by something. It could be a book or a movie or a memory, and that's what makes me really want to travel there. And that's true for India too. When I look back on my life, when I think about seeing the Beatles in Rishikesh when I was a child, and there's been a lifelong interest and attachment for me to India. But I'm from Canada, so obviously this is where I was brought up, and also obviously I have a very strong attachment to this country too. Going to the cottage in the summers and just being in Canada in the summer, being by the water. These are really important things to me. So this idea of meaningful adventure travel was the background for me coming up with the idea for my project, which is called Maritime Memories. And I recalled going on this road trip with my family when I was 4 years old to Atlantic Canada. We lived in Montreal at the time. Montreal, and where I live now is Toronto, and Montreal and Toronto are sort of more towards the center of the country. So, a suburban kind of household existence. So for me, getting in a car and driving, hundreds, I think possibly thousands, I'm not sure, of kilometers out to Atlantic Canada, to the Maritimes, to the ocean. That was a really, really, really big thing. Obviously it made a big impression on me. I was probably just the right age, just old enough to remember it. And I have these little distinct memories from that trip that have stayed with me all these years. I remember seeing a whale skull on a dock by the ocean. And the smell of the sea air and the cry of the seagulls, and eating lobster. I remember probably eating lobster for the first time, I'm guessing, in a big sort of outdoor feast where they just spread all this lobster all over the picnic table. I remember going to an inn on Cape Breton Island, and this beautiful old-fashioned inn, and it's still there, and I really want to go to that inn. And I believe it's called the Celtic Inn in Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia. And I remember traveling around Prince Edward Island, which is a beautiful pastoral island. And I remember seeing this old Tudor house that my brother and I decided was haunted. Just these little wonderful memories that they just made a big impression on me, in the sense that, my whole life I've always been really fascinated and really drawn to anything by the ocean. Shivya's by the ocean right now. Or no, you're interior, sorry. But Goa has obviously a beachfront. But anything that has to do with the ocean, fishermen, fishing, seagulls, eating seafood. I don't eat meat at all, actually. I'm practically a vegetarian, except I do eat fish and seafood. Who knows? Maybe it's all because of that trip. That's kind of what I want to re-experience, to kind of dig deep into that meaningful connection I have with Canada, my homeland, which I love. And then the other sort of sub-theme of my journey is about one thing I'm going to be documenting. The main thing I'm going to be documenting, aside from researching my own memories, is Canada is the second largest country on Earth. We have vast, wilderness here. Wild places, beautiful natural wild places. We have a big system of parks and reserves and things like that. But at the same time, the economy of Canada is resource-based, and with our current government especially, kind of leveraging that mining, oil, the oil industry and whatnot, is really jeopardizing the Canada's beauty and the natural beauty and heritage of our landscape. And so I want to showcase these natural, beautiful, wild places and how important they are, not just for the health of the planet, but for our own mental health, for tourism reasons. It's the biggest thing Canada has to offer. I mean, we have some wonderful cities here. Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver are vibrant cities. There's no question about it. But I mean, I think the big thing that Canada has to offer the world in terms of tourism, is our wilderness. The ability to, canoe and portage and go into lakes that you're the only person camping on that lake, and you watch a moose walk by, at sunset. I mean, this is the Canadian experience, and so I want to showcase that and preserve it. Try to help preserve it and show how important it is to preserve. So that's a kind of overriding goal of my project.
Yeah, you can definitely hear that passion that you've got in your tone of, basically just the overwhelming desire of just wanting to preserve things like that, because it's such an integral part of you as well. I mean, going back to when you were talking about your childhood memory, 4 years old, those were the formative years, the formative years. I mean, that's the sort of period of time when neurologists would say are the best years of learning a language of your entire life. And so, languages can go from what we speak to, basically our basic interactions to our environment. So it's almost as if, you've basically been learning how to speak the language of, the maritime surroundings, the nature that you've got. And you've got that awareness from that early on in your life as well. And it's actually a fantastic thing. And with you, Shivya, I am curious about this as well, because your project itself is much more, the actual name of the independent project actually sums up exactly what you're trying to do, which is about responsible travel. If you turn things around, the responsibilities of travel. What were your earliest memories of that? I mean, what were your earliest moments of the revelation that you need to have some sort of responsibility as a traveller and as a consumer, and why the industry should be providing for people who would like to be responsible?
Well, I think there wasn't one big moment that was sort of like, or one big trip that was sort of the revelatory moment that this is what we need to be focusing on. But I think unfortunately, whenever you travel to, and Mariellen, I'm sure, knows this, whenever you travel to a place in India that's frequented by Indian travelers, which is popular among domestic Indian travelers, you're going to realize, just the kind of impact irresponsible tourism has had on the local communities, on the environment, simple things as littering, but also big things like Mariellen's talking about, like mining and, damming of rivers and things like that, maybe things that are out of our control, but there are so many that are within our control. And I think it's only, when I moved back to India from Singapore that I started traveling in India, and I realized that there are so many small-scale initiatives in India which are trying to preserve, maybe just their little corner of the country, environmentally and culturally. And I think those are the kind of initiatives we need to support, so that something bigger like those can replace all the irresponsible tourism that's happening within the country. So I think it was really traveling within India and comparing it to traveling in other countries where, for example, in South Australia, where where very sensitive areas are preserved in beautiful ways, and you really marvel at the thinking behind those, and you wonder why can't they be taken to other parts of the world or even within our own conscience. And I think that's really what the comparison really spurred the thinking behind responsible travel. And I think the Ripple movement comes at the perfect time to sort of delve deeper into it, something that I've been wanting to do for a long time.
And I sort of like the ripple effect of influence, isn't it? Because sometimes you just need to have those couple of the pioneers per se who would actually do something, and they would, one, create the influence of being able to, impart the knowledge to the next party, but also, in a sort of more economic term, create the demand for a particular aspect. So in this case, as you said, responsible travel. I mean, it is very much a thing these days, with a lot of responsible tourism being talked about with different organizations like World Tourism and Travel Council and so on and so forth, and as well as World Travel Market, responsible travel as well. And so that's what it is. I mean, are there any, so with India itself, as you said, that they're actually, it's still in its kind of awakening stage at the moment. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's asleep, basically. So are there any brilliant incentives in India that you can think of at the top of your head that's doing it incredibly well? And, how was your particular story, your own personal story of being able to see it in first hand?
So you're talking about incentives?
Anything responsible travel, anything, hotels, accommodations, tours, anything that's getting it right, probably getting it done and getting it done well.
Yeah. So there are, in parts of India there are, for example, homestay schemes now, where where the locals are encouraged to convert their heritage homes or their environmentally conscious homes into homestays where they personally host travelers. So I think that's the extent of it. But of course, a lot of it is so people who so the scheme is such that you get a subsidy when you build a homestay, but you also you don't have to pay taxes on any business you generate through that. So what that has led to is a lot of people, creating hotels or creating, regular guest houses and calling them homestays to avoid paying tax. So I think there are both sides to that. But I mean, really, there's very little at the moment in India to incentivize responsible travel. And I mean, as somebody who can't exactly affect policy, I think what in my capacity, what I can affect is the thinking of people. I mean, to a small extent, at least my readers, and just to plant the idea of when you travel the next time, these are things that you can think about if you choose to, and not just because you're impacting a certain community, but like we were talking about before, just to have a deeper connection with the place.
And once again, I mean, we actually have two projecteers right here who are talking specifically about responsibilities of travel. And in that sense, they are, these guys are strong advocates of their respective topics, as opposed to some of the other projects that are more about observing particular cultures and observing particular sort of social phenomenon. And with these guys, I mean, with Shivya, for instance, she's very much focused on raising the awareness about responsible travel and basically start building up the awareness and the demand for it, so that there's a changing tide of how responsible travel is being considered in India, and hopefully that will make a giant impact, a massive difference in through the power of storytelling and media. And with you, Mariellen, you are trying to achieve something similar, but with things of the environmental conservation side of things. I mean, we have discussed about how your childhood memory has impacted you, and I believe that your sister herself is an environmental conservationist as well. Obviously, she's learned to speak that language very early on as well, I guess, in that sense. And I can only imagine that you two are going to work together to a certain capacity, because she would then have the connections in the sphere itself. I mean, how much do you know about the incentives, about the amount of work that's put into advocating for the preservation of the environment in Canada, and how do you think you're going to add on to that with your particular project?
Well, it's actually a whole new world for me. My when you talk about being passionate about responsible travel, my thus far, my passion has really been a bit about being culturally sensitive and being a culturally respectful traveler. And I noticed there's a big news topic going around right now about cultural sensitivity, and as in fact that because a couple of Canadians and a couple of other foreigners, I don't know whether you read this or not, but they apparently they were on a very sacred mountain in Malaysia, and were misbehaving. I believe they stripped naked and danced or something. I'm not sure, I don't have all the details. And then a couple of days later there was an earthquake, and 18 people died in Malaysia. And they've now arrested those, the Canadians, I believe. I'm not sure who else was there, but there was a couple of Canadians and they were arrested. And there's a lot of articles in the newspaper today about being, having a need to be culturally sensitive. And I feel like it's almost the first time I've read anything in the mainstream media in Canada about being culturally sensitive, although this has been my passion. This is what Breathe, Dream, Go is all about for years. And as you know, I'm on the long list for a world, what's it called? The World Responsible Tourism Award. World Responsible Tourism Award.
Deal, guys. Congratulations on that one. I hope you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do incredibly well, actually.
Well, I'm on the long list, so it's me and I'm not sure. I think there's 3 or 4 other bloggers are up for that award. There's, they're going to give the World Responsible Tourism Award for Best Responsible Tourism Blog. And even the fact that my blog is being considered is amazing to me, because I thus far have not been an advocate for the more traditional forms of environmental tourism, like environmentally responsible tourism. My passion has always been for cultural sensitivity and culturally responsible tourism. So this is kind of a bit of a new realm for me professionally, not personally. I mean, as I said, my sister and I, our family, we grew up having a cottage on a lake in the Canadian wilderness, and it deeply imprinted us. My sister now, she's an artist and, as you say, an activist, and she lives in a log cabin in the woods in the Canadian wilderness. It's not a coincidence, I mean, we were deeply imprinted with this love of the natural, beautiful wilderness environment of Canada, and it's just such a big part of the Canadian identity, and it's so important. But it is a new world for me, so I'm just investigating it now, conservation groups, and things like that. Like, I'm finding there is a whole world of people out there for sure, but it is actually a new world for me that I'm kind of just plugging into because of this project.
It's kind of like a new world and a familiar world to you anyway, because you are new to the social circles of the advocates, but the subject itself is not alien to you at all whatsoever. No. In fact, that's a good distinction to make. It's very heartfelt. It's very much part of my connection to my country, as it probably is for almost every Canadian. I mean, Canada's, we always say this, people come to, especially people from countries like India, they come to Canada and they go to Toronto and Vancouver, and it's like, you guys, that's not Canada. You've got to get out and go to see Algonquin Park, you got to go up into the Rockies, take the train across the country. There's an amazing train called the Canadian that goes across the country. Go out to the East Coast, hang out with the people on the East Coast are amazing. They'll give you the shirt off their back. They're my favorite people in Canada. I just love Atlantic Canada. That's why I'm going out there. It's a beautiful place. But you need to get out and see the beauty of the Canadian countryside and the wilderness. That's Canada. But so you're right. I have that heartfelt, passionate connection to that. But learning more about the actual the groups and the people who are working in that field. That's new. The social side of it, like you say, or the organizational, the activist side of it is new. Yeah, and that's very much two sides of the coin, isn't it? Because with something like what Shivya is doing, where she's documenting specifically about the responsible tourism practices, and is very much sort of on the industry side about all the providers who are doing things brilliantly. And then you've got the other side of the coin, where you've got the consumers themselves, the ones who need to be empowered to go out and make educated decisions when they go traveling. So they don't go, obviously dancing naked in Malaysia to maybe inadvertently have caused an earthquake. Who knows about it? But of course, we're going to have to be sensitive about it, because who knows? Absolutely, who knows? And that's the brilliant thing about travel media itself, because one of the things that I did just scribble down on a piece of paper that I want to mention as sort of like a case study is the Elephant Nature Park in Thailand. Now, what Mariellen was talking about just now about this particular article, which I have read, it's actually posted on the Ripple Movement Facebook community. And those of you who are watching right now, I really do hope that you will join in and participate in our discussions. There are lots of interesting things going on, some top names, and some of my esteemed peers in travel blogging and media who are actually posting stories about different things, different social issues. So if there's any way you can join in and participate in the discussions, that would be brilliant. So I'm going to post a link of that on the Ripple Movement Facebook page afterwards so that you guys can access it. Now, there's another article that I personally posted the other day that's about Thailand. Because in Thailand, there are actually a questionable amount of bad responsible practices going on, and things such as the Tiger Kingdom, for instance, which has always been a bit iffy, really, with the way how the tigers and the animals are being handled in there, and how cruelly they're being treated. Because obviously you can't just get a tiger to lie flat and let tourists stroke it. Obviously there are drugs involved. There are probably some canines being removed and claws and all that. And the other really good example, which actually exists also in Chiang Mai, where Tiger Kingdom is based, is Elephant Nature Park, which is founded by a woman called Lek, who's basically been out there rescuing elephants who've been brought in from having been overworked in manual labor, in actual labor, and also from elephant riding, which are both really, really strenuous and really bad for the health of an elephant. And it's one of those places I've actually gone to see for myself, and it's really incredibly harrowing as well, the entire experience. But more specifically, in that sense, who was actually working at the Elephant Nature Park as the PR person, Diana, whom her and I have actually together co-founded the Responsible Tourism Twitter chat at RTTC, which happens on every Wednesday. When she was working in that park, she actually created a whole social media and blogging campaign where she attracted travel bloggers from all around the world to come and visit and then write about the experience. And I honestly don't think that I've seen a better example of how the public awareness of the badness, the cruelty of elephant riding has come to light until that particular blogging campaign has happened, and that people are actually seeing and hearing the stories of how badly treated some of the elephants are, and especially with the breaking process of just basically taming the elephant is particularly cruel. And there's just been so many stories being talked about it, people are actually starting to open their eyes and see things for what they are. And I'm just going to bring this back to you two, actually, because there's very much that element, once again, about what the industry is doing brilliantly and the examples they're setting. But what about the consumers themselves? I mean, how do you envision your independent project, and possibly, to a certain extent, the Ripple Movement itself can actually bring that empowerment to people to tell people these stories about why you shouldn't be doing this and why doing that is great, without being too pushy, without being too preachy? Who would like to start?
I'll start because I have a Canadian connection for you.
Okay.
I'll segue my Canadian connection into my answer, which is Malcolm Gladwell, very well-known writer who's Canadian, although he lives in the U.S. And he wrote a book called The Tipping Point. And I don't know if anybody's read it, but The Tipping Point is one of his great books. And he talks about how sometimes it's like small things can add up and suddenly, create a wave of change. And he gives a whole bunch, it's a ripple effect, right? So you should read The Tipping Point if you haven't read it yet, because it's kind of exactly what the Ripple Movement's about. So I think what happens is that you can raise people's awareness about an issue. People see the world through their own little window and from their own experiences, and they just sometimes, they're good people, they're decent people, but they don't think about it. I know in my own life, I've evolved, I've changed, my awareness has grown, sometimes just through this sheer experience of living, and sometimes I actually put myself in situations like I do my spiritual practice, or previously I'm a trained Gestalt therapist. I did a lot of Gestalt therapy. And also traveling itself, I think, is awareness raising. I mean, I think you can get your awareness raised either just through the process of living, or you can actively raise it. But in any event, I think what we can do is, if we keep just speaking up about these things, like pebbles, like the pebbles making ripples, over time, I think it is possible to effect a paradigm shift in thinking. And it's just, it's like Malcolm Gladwell writes in that book, it's not something that you can necessarily have any control over. But if you keep throwing the pebbles in, eventually you might get a tidal wave. So I think that's what we're doing. Certainly that's what I've been doing with my blog, Breathe, Dream, Go. Trying to advocate for cultural sensitivity and awareness. It's specifically around India, but the philosophy can be extrapolated anywhere. And same here in Canada. I mean, Canadians, we do love our environment. We do know how important and beautiful it is, but at the same time, we have this natural resource reliant economy. It's a bit of a dilemma, and we're at a really critical point in the history of our nation and in the history of just the planet in terms of environmental stewardship. And so this is the time to be putting those pebbles out there about how important it is to preserve the natural, beautiful, wild spaces. And so I just want to throw my pebbles out there.
And I'm really looking forward to all the documentation you're going to be doing as well. I'm pretty sure that you're going to be running into some very interesting characters along the way who would have a very different opinion about the various ways of tapping into the natural resources and, to what extent to preserve them as well. So, I like I said, once again, very much looking forward to it. So what about you, Shivya? Same question. How would you like to see your own advocacy to the general public, and what kind of impact would you like to be creating with your project?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Mariellen when she says that the idea is to create a tidal wave, but you have to start with pebbles. And I think as far as responsible travel is concerned, and getting people to think about more responsible choices, I think my mission would be achieved if I can even plant the seed, in everyone's mind to just think twice about the choices that they make every single day. And I think that's where the wave really begins, in the mind. And I think that's where I want my project to go, for starters.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic, actually. Once again, very much looking forward to it as well, because some of the accounts you're going to be getting, I mean, you're going to be doing an interview series as well, I believe, and actually hearing those stories from the people, not from the consumer side, but from the industry side, is precisely what completes the coin as well, because you kind of need to see both sides of the story as well. As much as there is that awakening process going on with the consumers, and when they're making more educated decisions, so will the providers and the people in the industry will actually have to realize that responsible travel, or being responsible, is investable. And by the end of the day, people are just being practical because they have to feed themselves and they have to make a living. Sorry, Mariellen, you going to say?
Yeah, there's a whole concept that's coming up now. I think it's called I can't remember the name, something like ecological economics or something, where they actually are starting to, I posted an article about this on the Ripple Movement Facebook page about how there's economists who, very, very progressive thinking economists who have been advocating actually for years to say, let's put, clean air or clean water on the books as being valuable, make it part of the GDP. Or I'm not an economist, so I'm not sure how it would work. But they're saying let's estimate the value. And I think they talked about the value of Toronto's trees. They value Toronto's trees at $80 million, something like that. But then there's a massive value, like $1.7 billion, in terms of its productivity, cleaning the air, providing shade, reducing the need for air conditioning. When you start actually valuing this stuff and putting it on the books, that's just one of many ways you can get people to see these things differently. You can get them to, like we said, like in terms of the Ripple movement, just start a paradigm shift. Start to get people to value things that they may have taken for granted before. So that's one aspect of it. But there's one thing I want to say, which is my project is not so, just to be clear, it's not so much about, I'm not really planning to do a lot of interviewing or, really looking at statistics and these sorts of things. I'm a very strong humanist, and I really believe in the human experience. And it just showing one person's human experience. And actually, Shivya does a beautiful job of this on her blog, which is why she's one of my favorite bloggers, and I love her blog so much. Because, Shivya, you're really good at telling just beautiful humanistic stories. And sometimes that's far more powerful than all the experts and all the statistics put together. And actually, that is more the approach I want to take. Just showing the experience of being in these beautiful places. What do they look like? What do they feel like? How do I feel when I'm there? How does it calm my mind? How do I feel that sense of peace and tranquility and connection to nature? And I think even just one person's powerful experience of a naturally, beautifully maintained, clean place can be extremely powerful. And that's generally more my approach, really. I'm not a scientist. I've never taken the sciences. I always took humanities. I'm a creative person. So that's going to be more my approach. And that is not to discount the work of scientists and activists. And everybody's important in adding their pieces of the puzzle together, right? But the piece I want to add is really the purely personal documentation of going through this process and seeing these beautiful places and how they affected me as a child and how much I love them and how much I value them on a very personal and also creative level, photography, writing, creative writing. So that's going to be more my approach.
Yeah, and well, I guess we don't really need to be scientists per se. I mean, we just kind of need to be kind of with a slight psychological thinking with the whole thing, and that is the power of storytelling, isn't it? Because with stories, when you tell a story, when you tell a really powerful story, then people can relate to it. People can simulate the situation in their head, and they can kind of experience it without being there. But when you have stories that are so powerful that just simulating it in the head is not enough, that they have to physically go out there and make them experience for themselves on their own. And I guess that's kind of where travel media comes in, the advocacy of responsible travel, because when you can tell a story about an aspect in responsible travel or about responsibility powerful enough that people can't just sit there and go, oh, so next time I will go and have an intimate relationship with an elephant and not ride it. No, I mean, that itself isn't enough, that they would have to think, okay, I'm going to make that into one of the things I'll do the next time I go to Thailand or whatever. And I think this is kind of just completely concurring with what you said, Mariellen. It's more powerful than numbers, it's more powerful than statistics. It's human.
Yes.
And I think this is kind of another aspect that I love the most about both of you, actually, the way that you tell your stories and how you are basically not actively advocating for anything. You're not out there, waving your banners and, on the streets demonstrating or anything like that, but you are just telling your own personal account of how responsibility in travel is impacting you on a personal level and how your own narratives and your own personal journeys actually reflect on that and therefore get translated into the stories you tell. And I absolutely love that aspect. I really do.
I love the fact that you brought the word story in, which I didn't do amazingly because it's a word I use a lot. But yeah, storytelling, because the thing about storytelling. So thank you very much for that. Yes, Shivya and I are both storytellers, and the thing about storytelling is that storytelling doesn't just appeal to your mind; it grabs your heart. And people are hardwired. Every culture on earth has a tradition of storytelling, and people are hardwired to be impacted by stories. And so I think that's, everybody brings different expertise and skills to the table. Scientists bring what they bring, activists bring what they bring, but we bring storytelling, and I think it's just as powerful, perhaps even more powerful than almost anything else for telling these important stories.
And it's definitely something that we all can agree on as well, because on behalf of myself and Mariellen and Shivya and everybody else in the Ripple movement, in fact, we're all, storytellers at heart. We're not really going out there and just want to, basically twist the world into our way of thinking or anything like that. We just want to tell a bloody good old story, and that's the truth of intent, really. And so, on that note, is there anything you would like to add, you guys, before, because we're about to approach 3 o'clock, so I think we're going to wrap this up in about one minute or two. Is there anything in particular you would like to add, or you'd like to tell the viewers about right now before we switch off? Shivya, let's start with you.
Wow, I'm still thinking. That was no, that was a really good conversation. I think it's the whole idea of storytelling. It's something that how do I put this across? I think the whole idea of storytelling is what is behind the Ripple movement, and I think that's one of the reasons why Dylan, when you first asked if I was going to join this project, I think as bloggers we sometimes get distracted by I guess something that you said at the start. We get distracted by the balance that needs to be maintained with storytelling and our own personal journey. And I think with the Ripple movement, it's the project topics are such that it's going to be a personal journey for each one of us. So I think it's really a chance for me as a projecteer to connect back with something that I always wanted to do with my blog, but the focus has sort of gone everywhere in terms of the stories, in terms of the posts that I come up with, or the things that I report back with. And I think this is really an opportunity for me to really get back into the storytelling mode, but with a very defined focus on responsible travel. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to my own journey, but also to following the journeys of the other projecteers on board and reading about their experiences and their stories.
Fantastic. I personally can't wait either for responsible travel itself, your independent project. Mariellen, what about you?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it almost feels like the Ripple movement's a mosaic, and like a stained glass window or something, and it's going to be amazing to
analogy. Sorry, I just have to throw it out. I mean, you used the whole the pebble in the lake to form the ripples that might eventually form a tsunami. Sort of analogy. I'm just thinking, as a counter analogy, what you can actually do is glue a bunch of pebbles and then throw it all in at the same time.
I don't think that's very environmentally friendly to put glue in the lake.
As long as the glue is biodegradable, that's fine. I mean, it's all about the show. I mean, the rest of it, we just let it sink and forget about that. No, that's definitely not environmentally friendly. But let's just imagine it in our heads. Sorry, before I so brutally interrupted, you were saying.
Well, no. I mean, we're on the same wavelength. It's just the idea of, I'm just one single person, just me sitting here, and I'm just one of however many billions of people there are on the earth, and I'm not very important, but I am very important, both are true, because each human kind of represents the human experience, and chances are that if one person has a strong human experience, there's going to be a universal element to it that anybody can relate to, and that's what I'm really going to try to hope to get at with my project, is this idea of being connected to your own impressionable experiences of life and your country and your culture from an early age, from the age of 4 when you go on a trip with your family, to your values as an adult, including values of wanting to preserve those beautiful natural environments that are so important in every aspect of our life. So I'm really excited about exploring that, and just having one small window, but hopefully there'll be something universal. Hopefully something universal will come through my window that will affect other people and be that part of that Ripple movement to get people to value the natural environment and the beauty of it and the unique cultures of Atlantic Canada. I mean, Atlantic Canada is one of the special places of Canada. They have very unique cultures there that, you know, have roots, Celtic roots, and of course infused with the environment, you know, the seafood that comes out of the sea, and the various natural environments that are there. So that's part of it. But then, as we were talking about, then seeing how everybody's comes together, I'm really excited about that. Like the pebbles in the pond, or the mosaic, or the stained glass window, or whatever analogy you want to use. Seeing all these pieces coming together, and there's going to be overlaps, and there's going to be echoes, and there's going to be stuff that we can't possibly imagine or anticipate or plan. But there's going to be synergies, there's going to be magic. I know it's going to happen, and I don't know how or what it's going to look like, but I'm really excited about it.
And you talk about overlaps as well. I mean, you're getting me thinking about seafood now. So before I start going on about it, we are actually approaching 3:04. So I'm actually going to really quickly wrap it up here. So thank you so much to everyone who's actually tuned in. Really, really incredible that you guys have decided to come along and hear about what Mariellen and Shivya had to say about their independent projects and about the Ripple movement overall, which, you know, I only have the most profound gratitude to all you guys. So either you are now watching live or you are rewatching this. I wish you have a brilliant day. And this is goodbye from Mariellen just here. It's goodbye from Shivya over here.
Namaste.
Bye.
In true University Challenge style, it is goodbye from me, and I will again speak to you in about 5 hours' time in our next session, which is going to be about communities. So we're going to be joined by our projecteers Jenna and Joelle, who will be talking about how they want to investigate different aspects of communities around Europe. So I really do hope that you're going to tune in. In the meantime, it is finally goodbye from me. So speak to you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.